A few weeks ago, I did my Championship League table predictions where I split it into two parts on who I thought was going down and who I thought was going up. I did say in that video that it was very much a prediction in its infancy and that I would return to my league table predictions after deadline day when you can more fairly judge the squads and of course also take a little bit of information and knowledge from how teams have started the season 5 games in. So today I'm going to revisit my league table predictions, move a few of the teams around and see if I've changed who's going down and who is going up. So, here is the league table that I initially predicted before the season even started. So, like I say, this was a completely infant, embryonic league table, and a lot of it was based off of ifs, buts, maybes, hopes, expectations. A lot of clubs have altered that with some of the signings they've made and some of the starts they've made to the season, both positively and negatively. I did have Rotherham, Sheffield Wednesday and QPR to go down, with Cardiff, Huddersfield just narrowly escaping, and then from Plymouth upwards to around Watford. It was a mid-table mix-up of teams that wouldn't be too far away from one another, but, you know, could move and switch and very well be within 7 or 8 points of each other, but that was the order I chose. And then fighting for the playoffs, I had Coventry, Millwall, Swansea just outside the playoffs, with Ipswich sneaking in 6th. I had Leeds and Southampton in 5th, with Sunderland in 3rd, just missing out in the automatics to Boro and Leicester as my champions. Now, of course, that has changed quite a bit since then, so let's go through every team, bottom to top, run through my thoughts on them so far this season and where they are now in my new revisited league table. Starting off with Rotherham United, I had them bottom of the league, and let's be honest, I feel so far this season that Rotherham have done quite well and have been competitive in plenty of games and have been unlucky at times. Obviously got a huge win recently which has got them off and running with their first win of the season, but still I feel like looking at their squad it's still going to be an unbelievably tough job for Matt Taylor to keep this Rotherham side up. And I think just with the sheer competitiveness of the Championship mid-table and the teams around them, they are still going to be in a relegation battle. Will still finish in my bottom 3, but I have got them off the bottom and they've moved up to 23rd, going up 1 position. Sheffield Wednesday, now I, as everyone did, was really worried about Sheffield Wednesday following their summer transfer business, and not much really changed. Couple that with their start to the season, despite a promising point at Ellen Road before that, it was absolutely diabolical. So you won't be surprised to hear that Sheffield Wednesday haven't moved up in my ranking. They've in fact moved down. I still have them to get relegated, but instead I have them finishing at the foot of the table, going down 1 position. Next up we have QPR, who I did have in that 3rd relegation spot, and I've been pleasantly surprised and quite impressed with Gareth Ainsworth so far. I still think this QPR side nowhere near the quality required or the depth required to be safely in mid-table. I think there's been some really good results thus far this season. It's great to see that Gareth Ainsworth has gotten this QPR side playing a more effective manner of football. But what I will say is I still think they'll be struggling for their lives and fighting in a relegation battle that will go all the way. But I no longer have them to get relegated. I have a little bit of faith in Ainsworth that he will just steer them clear of the relegation zone, whether it be within the final few weeks of the season or whatever. I have got them up to 20th in my league table. Still very much in a relegation battle, but surviving. Just outside, I had Cardiff City, and I've kept them in 21st. There's not been anything to suggest that Cardiff are going to exceed my initial expectations or at the same time drop below my initial expectations. What we've seen from Cardiff so far is a side that look alright and will be competitive, but ultimately cannot hold on to results. They got a point at Ellen Road, yes, but lost to Ipswich when they were leading 2-0 into the second half, and have looked pretty woeful in some of their home games, narrowly beating Sheffield Wednesday and losing to QPR. So as much as their transfer business looked pretty promising, and I did start to wonder whether they could steer clear of relegation, I've started to think that they might drop back in and be properly embroiled in that battle. But as I predicted at the start, I think they will just about survive narrowly, and I've kept them just outside the dotted line in 21st. Next up I have Huddersfield, who I had in 20th, and I just thought with Neil Warnock at the helm, it would be naive of me to go against him and believe that he wouldn't do another Neil Warnock and keep this Huddersfield side up. But being truthful, they've probably had the worst transfer window of the whole of the Championship, and barring that late win against West Brom, which might be a springboard to bigger and better things, their start to the season prior to that was pretty bad. They'd only scored 2 goals. I believe one of them was an own goal, and it was against Boro actually, so not looking good going forward. Haven't added. Warnock doesn't seem happy, and I join a lot of other people who have a feeling that maybe at some point this season he might just think that this isn't for him anymore, and maybe he should have just left at the end of the season. So I've got Huddersfield to drop into my bottom 3. I've been a little concerned about their start to the season, and I'm not convinced Warnock will stick around if things continue. So I've got them now replacing QPR in my 3rd relegation spot, and I've got Huddersfield dropping 2 positions to 22nd. Next up in 19th I had Plymouth Argyle, and I've been very, very, very impressed with them, and I'm delighted for them. In all honesty, I expected them to steer clear of relegation. Like I said at the start of the video, anyone above 20th I fancied to be in a mid-table battle, pretty clear from relegation, but Plymouth have exceeded my expectations even more so. I did initially predict, and I mentioned in my first predictions video, that I think their home form would keep them up, and I wasn't sure how they'd fare away from home, but in honesty, they've been more than competitive and have held their own away from home at a lot of their games so far, and have looked just as reliable and strong at home that they did last season. So I don't think Plymouth will even be embroiled in much of a relegation battle at all. In fact, I think they'll steer clear of it all, and they'll be in mid-table, and I've got them rising 6 positions up to 13th in the league. I think that would be a very, very good and a very impressive finish for Plymouth, and I think they're on track to do it. In 18th, I had Stoke City, and I've actually dropped Stoke 1 position to 19th. Now, a big reason as to why Stoke and a few of the teams above them have dropped a position is mostly because Plymouth have jumped them in my league table prediction. So I've got not much else to really say about Stoke. I even got slightly drawn in to their start to the season, and I thought maybe Stoke have turned a corner, maybe they've found some consistency, they've signed so many new players. It's a similar sort of scattergun transfer policy to what they've done in the past, so I was still a bit hesitant to truly get behind it. But I think in recent weeks, they've recently lost at home, of course, haven't looked very good away from home either. I just can't really come up with a strong enough reason or argument for why Stoke are going to be any better or any worse than last season. So that's why I've kept them in a similar position, falling 1 place down to 19th. You could say exactly the same for who I had in 17th, and that's Blackburn Rovers. In all honesty, again, they, like Stoke, had a good start, but have dropped a few points of late, losing 3-0 to Plymouth, and again, just like Stoke, rinse and repeat. I feel like it will be another inconsistent season for Rovers, and they will drop a little lower than where they were last season. I think the loss of Ben Brereton Diaz as well is a huge loss, and I just don't feel like they'll have enough quality to consistently pick up results that would keep them in a playoff hunt, and therefore will drop below some of the teams I've mentioned and will be around where I put them, and that is dropping 1 place down to 18th. In 16th, I had Preston North End, and they currently sit top of the table. Now, don't get me wrong, I am incredibly impressed by what Ryan Lowe has done there. They've had a top quality manager, and I've always had a feeling he could take Preston that little bit further up the table. But when I say up the table, I mean in a playoff fight, not outsiders who have an outside chance when they're maybe 5 or 6 points, 7 points from the playoffs with a few games to go. I mean a team that are in the playoffs a bit more regularly, jumping in and out between 6th and 7th, and could be in there until the very end of the season. And I feel like that's where they will be this season. I think let's still be realistic. Preston being top of the league at this point is somewhere they're not going to stay, but they certainly look like a very good defensive outfit, and they've recruited very cleverly so far, I would say, this season, and some of their incomings have proven to be very, very effective. So I've got Preston rising 8 positions, and I've got them in 8th. And like I said, the reason for that is that I don't think they'll quite have enough over the season to get a playoff spot, but they will certainly be in the fight a lot more than they have been in the past. In 15th, I had Bristol City, and in all honesty, like I said with Blackburn and Stoke, they've dropped 1 position to 16th, just because there's a few teams like Plymouth who I think are just going to better them this season. And you know what, Bristol City have made a tremendous start to the season, but this isn't the first time we've seen Bristol City have a streak of good results, more so, especially away from home in this case, and their inconsistency is their downfall, and they'll have a run of 4 or 5 games unbeaten, and then they'll have a run of 7 or 8 without a win. And again, like Stoke and Blackburn, I've seen nothing to suggest otherwise, that it will be another up and down season for Bristol City, where they won't be any trouble, but they're not going to be consistent enough to fight for the playoffs either. So that's why I've kept them similar to where I was before, and I've dropped them down 1 position to 16th. In 14th, I had West Brom, and I've kept them exactly where they are. They have pretty much done exactly as I expected them to do so far this season. They've looked good in some games, they've not looked good in others. They've of course beat Boro, albeit Boro was they gave them a huge helping hand in doing so, and looked pretty good away at Ellen Road, but at the same time went and lost at home to Huddersfield. So we know that the home record that Corberan has at the Hawthorns is pretty good. It's away from home where West Brom are a little bit weak, and I think they're just going to be slightly restricted by their lack of transfer activity. They've of course been tied up and unable to really spend much this summer, and they've lost a bit of quality as well. But I just think, like I said in my initial predictions, Corberan is one of the best coaches in the league, and I think that's why he will just get enough results to keep West Brom stable and steady, and I think that's the season they need this season, a stable and steady one without much drama, and results have pretty much gone as I expected them, up and down, little inconsistent, and that's why I've kept them where they were in 14th. In 13th, I had Norwich City. A big reason for that was that I just was not convinced by David Wagner, and I will say this, I've been a little surprised and impressed by Norwich and how they've played such lovely, fluid attacking football so far this season. And as much as that might get a lot of Norwich fans excited and thinking that they could be in the playoffs this season, I'm not quite getting that carried away yet. And that's why I've got them going up 4 positions in the league, up to 9th. I feel like we've seen signs this season that they've got enough players, especially the likes of Gabriel Sara in midfield, who are going to be some of the best creative and attacking players in the league. And the likes of Adam Eder stepped up a little bit this season. I think Ashley Barnes has done well for them too. But Josh Sargent was a huge part as to why they've started the season so well, and they've lost him for a long period of time now. And I think we maybe saw in that Rotherham game what might happen when things don't quite fall into place for Norwich. So listen, I've still got them improving and doing a lot better than I thought they would, but I still don't think that's quite enough to break into the top 6. So I've got Norwich sat in 9th. Above them, I had Birmingham City in 12th, and I've kept Birmingham in 12th. And that might seem like a strange decision, given the fact that they've started the season so incredibly well. But in my initial league table predictions, I predicted them to get up to 12th because I thought they would play as they have done. And let's not make any mistakes, I think Birmingham have had the best transfer window of any championship side, and they've been 17th or under for the last 5, 6, 7 seasons. So I think me putting them up to 12th in my initial predictions was pretty complimentary, and keeping them there I think is just the same. They've looked very good this season, but I think it's still just a bit too much of a jump from Birmingham to be consistently in the bottom 8 to then all of a sudden, you know, taking a huge leap into the playoffs. I don't think they're quite there yet. This might be a transition season for them, but if they can have a steady, drama-free mid-table finish next season, could be a pretty special one for the Blues. In 11th, I had Hull City, and I've kept them there in 11th. Again, very similar to Birmingham. I put a lot of faith in my initial predictions that Hull would progress under Liam Rosenior, and to be fair, they've made some pretty good signings. Liam Delap's looked very, very good since he's come in, and dare I say it, as a Boro fan who saw the absolute worst of Aaron Connolly, he's actually been pretty good for them so far. Obviously, Tufan is the top scorer in the league, or the joint top scorer, and I just look at Rosenior and how knowledgeable he is, and I just feel like Hull are only going to go one way under him. And listen, it might take a few seasons it might not be overnight success, but I think Hull should be really grateful for the manager they have and the coach they have, and that under him, as long as he stays, we'll only have Hull going in one direction. And I said this in my previous prediction, and I'm standing by it here. They've made a great start. They're showing the progression I expected them to, and that's why I'm keeping them there in 11th place. In 10th, I had Watford, and I will admit I found Watford incredibly tough to predict. And you know what? I still do. They started the season like a house on fire at home to QPR, but that was a QPR side that hadn't quite been tinkered like it has done and hasn't developed like it has done since under Ainsworth, and they then failed to score in 3 successive games. They got a good draw away at Coventry, but I'm still not quite convinced Watford have got the quality that they had last season. They've sold Pedro, they've sold Sarr, and I don't think they've brought in the quality initially to replace them. I think their squad's a bit weaker than what it was last season, so I can't back them to match where they were last season with the rest of the league, like Hull and Birmingham and Norwich just seemingly taking a slight step forward. And of course some of the teams that have come up like Ipswich and Plymouth have also took really well to the league. So I have dropped Watford down a few places. I've dropped them down 5 places to 15th. I think they're going to have a very similar season to West Brom. Up and down, they'll win one week, draw the next, lose the next, and won't quite put a run together. But again, this is Watford. We don't know how many managers they might go through this season and how their owners might react in certain situations. And that's why it's best to play it safe with Watford and keep them around mid-table. They've sadly just dropped a few positions for me due to their lack of quality, going down 10th down to 15th. Above them in 9th, I had Coventry, and I will admit I maybe slightly underestimated Coventry in my initial predictions, because looking back at their summer business, I think given the fact that they have gotten rid of their 2 star players who seemingly everything went through last season in Hamer and Gyökeres, they have not been afraid to reinvest that money, which I think is brave. I think a lot of clubs, maybe like Bristol City with Alex Scott for example, haven't quite done that, and I think the fact that Coventry have seen that there's an opportunity for them here with the money that they've got, they've went for it and they've invested. And when a team does that, I like to see them be rewarded for that bravery. And I just feel like Coventry have just got a level of consistency that a lot of teams below them can't quite match over a course of a season. I've mentioned the likes of Watford and Norwich, West Brom, even going further down, Bristol City, Stoke City, for example, teams who can have a good run of form and you start to wonder, but then they'll have an equally bad run of form. Coventry, I think, are just always, they're always at least 6 or 7 out of 10, and I think that consistent level of performance will get them in the playoffs. And they've got probably the best coach in the league in Mark Robins, who I think, when given time to bed their new signings in, could turn this Coventry side into something very exciting. So even if there is a little bit of underwhelmment, if that's even a word, from the Coventry fans so far, I have a feeling they'll come good, and I've got them in my playoff 4 as they were last season, and history suggests that under Mark Robins they will continue to progress, and that's why I've got them finishing 5th once again, and they're up 4 places from where I had them before. In 8th, I had Millwall. Now, it's not been a good start for Millwall, but listen, I'm not overreacting from that. I feel like they've steadied the ship in the last 2 results, and importantly for them, Kevin Nisbet has started to get on the score sheet. And I just feel like Gary Rowett has enough credit in the bank to show and prove that he is a good manager, and he will get a good job done. Now, whether that's what Millwall want is another question. They probably want to take a step forward and be in the playoff fight, like Coventry, for example, and I don't quite have them in the playoff fight. I feel like they'll be on the outskirts looking in, but because of the quality of sides around them improving, a little bit like what I said about Watford, I think Millwall will stay around about where they are. They're certainly not going to take the step forward into the playoffs, and that for me obviously means that they're not going to finish in the playoffs. I had them in 8th, and I've dropped them 2 positions, and I've dropped them down to 10th because I have got them below Preston and Norwich. So I feel like them 2 have took a step forward. Millwall are about the same, and that's why I think they'll be overtaken by 1 or 2 sides. They'll still be in and outside of the playoffs, don't get me wrong. I don't think their start to the season is probably as much to worry about as it looked before, but I have got them dropping just 2 positions down to 10th. Now in 7th I had Swansea City, and you guys will notice there is a glaring gap towards the bottom of my new updated league table, and well, I've nerfed Swansea. I've dropped them 10 places down to 17th. Now, I looked at Swansea's recruitment and I just had a gut feeling. I had a gut feeling that they would do well, and they still might. Listen, they've had a bad start just like Boro, and you'll notice I've got Boro to finish at least in the top 7 of the table. But I just feel like I don't know, I just feel like if this run continues, I think Michael Duff could be the first manager to be in a little bit of danger. And it might be very, very early to say that, but I feel like you look at the players, Ryan Manning, Latabaudier, Joel Pirro, Obafemi, among others that have left the club. Have they reinvested and strengthened? And I think the owners of Swansea have done what they did when Russell Martin was there, and one of the things that obviously caused him to have such grievances, and that is that they've just not backed the manager. They've just not quite attacked the window, and they've played it safe. And I feel like for Michael Duff in this first season, with a weaker squad than before, they might just need to have a steady season, and I just can't see this Swansea team breaking into the playoffs. I feel like, as I said, there'll be a mid-table fight with not much between the sides in 11th, 12th, down to maybe 17th, 18th, 19th, and that's why I've got Swansea in that mix. I think that's where they'll be, and I think their huge drop isn't anything against them. I think it's more against me and my initial prediction, which had them up in 7th, which seems a bit stupid now. So yeah, sorry Swansea fans, I'm going to take the blame on this one. I'm going to drop you all the way down to 10 places to 17th. They are my biggest fallers in my updated predictions. In 6th, I had Ipswich Town, and question on everyone's lips was, is the Ipswich hype train worth it? Is it true? Is it worth jumping on the Ipswich hype tractor? I think we can only say that it is worth it. I felt like it was a bold prediction putting Ipswich in 6th initially, and I've got no reason to doubt that they'll be in the top 6. But because of the teams I had above them recently in my initial predictions, mostly Boro, Sunderland, not looking as good as Ipswich, and I don't think looking as well-rounded, I've got Ipswich to jump both of them, and Southampton, and Leeds. I've put Ipswich in 2nd. I've put them up 4 into the automatic promotion places, and the reason why is this. I've seen Ipswich win in so many different ways, and all the signs are there that they have got everything, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed in every department. They can win from behind even when they were 2-0 down to Cardiff. They can compete with the Leeds United side, who had to be ultra clinical to beat them that day. They've looked very, very good in nearly every game so far this season. They've scored plenty of goals. They look unbelievably tough to play against at home, and I think have got enough defensive solidarity to also pick up plenty of results away from home. Now, one bad run of results could completely unravel this Ipswich side, and then maybe we'll see what Kieran McKenna is all about. But the signs so far have them right up there for me. As I mentioned, Boro miles off it. Sunderland, not quite the side they were last season, and I think Southampton and Leeds have certainly shown that they aren't bulletproof. Ipswich are quite bulletproof, if you ask me. So this is a bold prediction. Nothing wrong with chucking a bold one in there. Going up 4 positions, back-to-back promotions. I've gone with the Tractor Boys. Let's see how this one turns out. In 5th, I had Leeds United, and Leeds have actually gone up 1 position to 4th. And you might be wondering, well, how the hell has that happened? They've looked pretty average this season. And I will say this, a reason why Leeds and another team have gone up 1 position is because Boro and Sunderland, who I initially had 2nd and 3rd, don't look like teams who will finish 2nd and 3rd at all. That's why I've kept Leeds where they were, but they have simply gone up a place because 2 teams I had above them have dropped below them. And I've not got much else to say about Leeds. I feel like at the time of my initial predictions, a lot of question marks, a lot of uproar, a lot of uncertainty, and I feel like they've steadied the ship somewhat. Now, don't get me wrong, still an absolute mess of a transfer window in terms of the outgoings and the loan clauses in the contracts of their best players, and they've recouped nowhere near the money they should have done, which has undoubtedly handcuffed them for a lot of the transfer window. But they've still managed to bring in the likes of Joel Pirro, who I think is a very, very good player, and Ampadu is a good signing as well, and they've kept Nonto, Rutter is still there. They've lost Sinistera, which is a little bit of a loss, but I just feel like this Leeds United side under Daniel Farke should have enough. And if he doesn't get Leeds into the playoffs, it's a failure for me. It's a huge failure. So that's why I'm expecting them to still be there. They might not be in the playoffs by much. It might not be comfy. They might not squeeze in until the very end, and they might be in a fight until the very end. But I've got them to stay in there and go up one position, mostly due to the teams I had above them. Exactly the same can be said for Southampton. I'm a little bit more sceptical of them. I've got them going up one place up to third, again, because Boro and Sunderland have dropped below them. But my big question mark is Russell Martin's side defensively and whether their quality can get them through this season. I mean, it should. You look at their squad and Leicester's squad especially, and the players they've got at their disposal, coached properly and performing to the level they should, there is no reason why they shouldn't be in the top six. And like I said with Farke, if Martin can't get this side into the top six, it is an unmitigated failure. But they should be there. And they've got the firepower to be there with Che Adams staying. Adam Armstrong started the season incredibly well. I just feel like if Martin gets it right, they'll finish in the top six. And they'll probably finish in the top four. However, am I convinced? No. But this is what I expect him to do with this Southampton side. In third, then, I had Sunderland, and listen, I looked at Sunderland's squad from last season, and I said in my initial predictions, if they keep their squad together and only develop more under Tony Mowbray, they'll just take a step forward. They've not done that. I feel like they've brought in some really exciting young signings, but they've also lost Ross Stewart, who was a big reason as to why I had them in third, because I just thought a fully fit Ross Stewart is the difference maker for them. But he's left, he's gone to Southampton, which again could help propel Southampton up to third. And I just look at Sunderland and think that a lot of young and exciting players, but they've lost Stewart, they've lost Gooch, and equally sort of brought in quality to replace them. So that's why I think they'll stay at a similar level as to where they were last season. I think keeping Clark and Roberts is a massive plus, but I know this is weird saying this after they've just won 5-0, but I still have concerns about Sunderland without a striker. You can't quite rely on a young squad to consistently perform at a certain level throughout the whole season. So I've not got Sunderland to regress, but I've not got them to particularly progress either. When you look at Coventry, Southampton, Leeds, etc. So that's why I've kept Sunderland relatively to where they were last season, but nerfed my initial predictions and dropped them down 4 positions to 7th. Second, I had Boro, and this was based off of what we'd seen from Michael Carrick last season and based off of what I expected us to do in the transfer window. And albeit, yes, we've had an atrocious start, do not get me wrong. There are signs there, when you dig below the surface, that Boro are still a very creative side, like they were last season. Are they going to score the level of goals last season? No, I don't think they will. But we are creating enough chances, and if we put even half of them, 2/3 of them away, we'll still score 60-70 goals, which should get us into the playoffs. And it's just about keeping the goals out at the back. And again, the data shows that we've conceded from very low XG chances, and a lot of these own goals don't happen. A lot of these long-range screamers don't go in. A lot of the draws that we've had would have turned into wins, like Huddersfield. A lot of the defeats, like West Brom and QPR, might have turned into draws, and suddenly Boro are a side that are sat in mid-table right now, and you're looking at a young squad who, with time to develop and gel, should be fighting in the playoffs. So it's easy to maybe look at it at face value and see that Boro's start has been shambolic, but we've recruited relatively well. I think Giles has been replaced by Engel. A lot of these players are still yet to prove themselves, but if they can develop and become even half the players that they were, I think we'll be in with a great chance. Engel's come in for Giles, as is Bangura. I think Lewis O'Brien could be the best midfielder in the Championship. We've brought him in a position where we desperately needed a bit more cover and discipline. And it all depends on if the likes of Morgan Rogers and Latilath can get the goals and assists to replace Archer and Akpom. I don't think they will entirely, but there are signs there that Latilath's getting plenty of chances, and if he starts putting them away, we might have another 20-goal striker on our hands. So I don't think it will be anywhere near as easy for Boro this season. I don't think they'll be in the top 6 with weeks to go, playoffs secured. I think it will probably go all the way, and it could be the likes of Boro, Sunderland, Preston, Coventry, maybe Norwich fighting for that playoff spot, that final 2 playoff spots. But I've just put my ultra-optimistic Boro hat on and got us to squeeze in a 6th, but it won't be easy. And finally, you'll probably be able to realise now the team I had top, my title winners, has remained the same, and that's Leicester City. Let's not beat around the bush. The last result to Hull was, of course, a pretty concerning one. However, they'd won every game up until that point, and they'd not gotten out of second gear. So I would be being very reactive and reactionary if I was to suddenly say that Leicester aren't going to be my title winners because they've lost 1 game to Hull City when they still created a lot of chances to get back into that game. It is a case of, will they continue to drop points like this, or under Maresca, will they gradually improve? And I'd like to think they will. And as we've seen, if Leicester can even improve 10, 20, 30%, they'll win a lot more games than they'll lose. And I think they've just got a higher ceiling than a lot of the teams around them and the other 2 sides that have come down with them. So I still think anything other than a title victory and promotion for Leicester with the squad they have and the quality they have would be an utter failure from Maresca. So that's why I've got them still, and I expect them to still go up as champions. So guys, there's my revisited league table prediction. Let me know what you think your team, and where you think your team will finish in the comment section below. Do remember, it's all subjective. I know every single person will love their team to finish top of the league or in the playoffs or going up for promotion, but you can't have 24 teams in the top 6, unfortunately. So I understand there'll be a few that maybe won't be happy with my predictions. But listen, it's subjective. They're my opinions. I'd love to hear yours respectfully in the comment section below. But until next time, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, do hit the like button and subscribe for much more Championship content. I will be bringing out another video gridding every side's start to the Championship season, as well as doing predictions and matchday roundups of every weekend in the Championship. But until next time, do take care, guys. I'll see you all next time.